This is Bushwick in Brooklyn, New York. In the 21st century, this former industrial neighborhood has become a center of nightlife and culture. As with many trendy neighborhoods, Bushwick's transformation has brought rapid physical and demographic changes, including displacement and gentrification. Bushwick was once a working-class Italian and Puerto Rican enclave dotted with factories, but now it's become increasingly populated by unemployed liberal arts majors and insufferable quote-unquote creatives, DJing, writing poetry, and making experimental art.
If you're walking down Myrtle Avenue, finding God at Brooklyn's most famous street corner, or stumbling home from a rave in the middle of the night, you may have wondered, what the f*** is Bushwick, and how did this happen?
The history of Bushwick shares many commonalities with Williamsburg, an adjoining Brooklyn neighborhood one stop away on the L train. Both areas were inhabited by the Lenape people until the Dutch established the colony of New Netherland in the early 1600s. Bushwick, which was derived from a Dutch word meaning town in the woods, was chartered as a settlement in 1661, forming one of the 6 original Dutch towns in Brooklyn. After the English took over New York, Bushwick was anglicized to Bushwick. Back then, Bushwick actually included present-day Williamsburg and Greenpoint, although in 1840, Williamsburg seceded from Bushwick to form its own independent city. However, Williamsburg and Bushwick both joined the larger city of Brooklyn in 1855. As America industrialized, Bushwick and Brooklyn as a whole grew rapidly. Factories, chemical plants, and industrial yards began to dot its landscape. In the 1840s and 1850s, large numbers of German immigrants settled in Bushwick. These new arrivals built a high concentration of breweries on the so-called Brewers Row on Nesrole Street. And when the Williamsburg Bridge was completed in 1903, Bushwick was directly connected to Manhattan. In the early 20th century, parts of Bushwick became affluent. Mansions, elegant row houses, and theaters appeared in the neighborhood. After World War I, Italians steadily replaced Germans as the dominant ethnic group in the area, with most immigrants coming from Sicily. By 1950, Bushwick became one of the largest Italian-American enclaves in New York City.
However, Bushwick's economy declined throughout the mid-1900s due to the loss of industrial jobs and the closure of the many breweries that once called the neighborhood home, like this former brewery right behind me.
Industry left New York around this time due to a variety of factors: rising land, labor, and tax costs, increased competition from global markets, and the rise of highways and freight trucks, which made it less important for factories to be located close to ports. Similar to many neighborhoods in New York and around the country, Bushwick experienced white flight in the 1960s as middle-class Germans and Italian Catholics left for the suburbs. Blockbusting was a practice in which real estate agents would exploit racial tensions by fear-mongering homeowners, convincing them that minorities were rapidly moving into their neighborhoods. Residents would flee to the suburbs and sell their homes at a fraction of their real value, which would then be sold at inflated prices to ethnic minorities seeking upward mobility. In the 1960s and 70s, Bushwick transitioned to a mostly black and Puerto Rican neighborhood. However, due to predatory lending practices, many new residents had little chance of meeting mortgage payments, causing homes to then be foreclosed and fall vacant. Real estate operators on some of these homes could still collect millions in mortgage insurance from the federal government, which would protect lenders against losses. These vacant buildings would then become havens for drug addicts and squatters, leading to further urban decay. Around this time, arson became widespread in New York, frequently by landlords seeking to collect insurance money. Urban decay in Bushwick was exacerbated by New York City's budget crisis in the 1970s, which resulted in slashed spending on social services. The notorious 1977 blackout further damaged the already impoverished neighborhood. On July 13, 1977, thunderstorms hit New York City, damaging the electrical grid and plunging 9 million people into darkness. Soon after, widespread looting, vandalism, and arson erupted onto the streets. Broadway Avenue, an iconic commercial street separating Bushwick from Bed-Stuy, was one of the hardest hit. On Broadway alone, 134 stores were looted and 44 were set ablaze. Entire city blocks were destroyed. The damage was so extreme that residents of Ridgewood, Queens, an adjoining neighborhood that shared a zip code with Bushwick, voted successfully to create an entirely new zip code to disassociate themselves from Bushwick's negative reputation and prevent increases in insurance premiums. After the blackout, vacancy rates increased in Bushwick's commercial hubs, further worsening the economic conditions of the neighborhood. The 122,000 residents of Bushwick in 1975 plummeted to 93,000 in 1980, marking a nearly 25% decline in population. An area known as the Well on Knickerbocker Avenue became a notorious drug market. Maria Hernandez Park, which is the largest park in Bushwick, is named for a 34-year-old woman who was murdered after attempting to organize the community against the drug trade. During the late 20th century, various community groups in and around Bushwick made efforts to uplift the neighborhood, from churches like St. Barbara's to organizations like El Puente, based in Williamsburg. In the 1990s, crime began to decrease across New York City. Some attribute these decreases in crime to the policies of New York Police Commissioner William Bratton, who led a tough-on-crime approach influenced by broken windows theory. Numerous economic and social factors affect crime rates, and the effects of certain policies can be debated, but one thing is for certain. Rampant crime led to horrible living conditions for residents of Bushwick across several decades. Williamsburg and Bushwick eventually became safe enough that transplants and college-educated creatives would consider living there. As Manhattan's artistic neighborhoods like Soho and the East Village became more commercial and expensive, artists and their hipster followers began to migrate across the East River to Williamsburg, an industrial neighborhood very similar to Bushwick.
The availability of cheap rents and industrial spaces that could be used for music or art, and its relative proximity to Manhattan, made northern Brooklyn an attractive place for artists to move.
In the mid-2000s, the city government started the Bushwick Initiative, a project to increase quality of life in the neighborhood by improving housing conditions, reducing drug activity, and spurring economic development.
Throughout the 2000s, artists and creatives started flocking to Bushwick.
As Williamsburg became trendier, it also got more expensive, pushing prospective renters to look to adjacent neighborhoods like Greenpoint, Bed-Stuy, and Bushwick, which is only a couple more stops along the L train into Brooklyn. From the 90s to the late 2000s, industrial neighborhoods in Brooklyn like Williamsburg and Bushwick were home to thriving DIY and underground scenes, where DJs, artists, and musicians would throw parties in empty warehouses or residential spaces, often illegally.
Now, I can't comment on the current underground scene, but I can give you a lesson on rave safety.
While attending an illegal rave may sound cool, especially if you're living it up in your Brooklyn era, they are illegal for a reason. Fire hazards make a lot of these spaces extremely dangerous. In 1990, a fire at an unlicensed club in the Bronx killed 87 people, and in 2016, 36 people in Oakland were killed when a fire broke out at the Ghost Ship, a warehouse that was turned into an artist collective. After the Oakland tragedy, New York officials vigorously cracked down on unlicensed spaces. While these actions undoubtedly saved lives, they dealt a blow to the city's creative communities, as many artists who couldn't afford up-to-code spaces were left without options. Some underground spaces adapt to survive.
Market Hotel, an iconic DIY space in Bushwick located beside elevated train tracks, was closed by the police in 2010.
It had no ventilation, sketchy electrical systems, and decaying interiors. It eventually reopened to the public after being updated to comply with regulation, and it's now a thriving place to catch shows from punk to hyperpop. In 2014, Bushwick was named the 7th coolest neighborhood in the world by Vogue magazine, almost sealing its fate in the seemingly inescapable trend towards gentrification. Moreover, the formerly edgy neighborhoods like the East Village and Williamsburg became too basic for the liberal arts majors cosplaying as blue-collar. Bushwick contained a more authentic grit, which unfortunately is one way that pretentious hipsters and yuppies display their cultural capital. Bushwick today epitomizes quote-unquote alternative youth culture. It is where people actually do all the hipster shit you see on Twitter and Instagram, smoke cigarettes to look edgy, host communal eternal stews, and where they literally hand out anti-fascist self-defense handbooks at the public park. The new arrivals brought large demographic changes to Bushwick, sometimes resulting in ethnic tensions. In the year 2000, Bushwick was 3% white, but as of 2022, over a quarter of the neighborhood is. These days, some complain that the arrival of finance bros, tech bros, and new development in Bushwick is pricing out the artists who made the neighborhood cool and trendy to begin with. In the words of reporter Eric John, to act as if artists, specifically college-educated young adults, are victims instead of part of the problem is dishonest and ignores the people truly harmed as Bushwick becomes ever more synonymous with cool.
How do we stop the gentrification in Brooklyn?
I'm from LA, and I also feel like a victim of it, but
What neighborhood do you live in?
Bushwick.
Wait, so you're from LA and you live in Bushwick? That sounds like a f***ing gentrifier to me.
Post-pandemic, Bushwick has become the center of Brooklyn nightlife.
According to Bloomberg, the Jefferson Street subway station has the highest percentage of post-midnight and pre-dawn ridership in Brooklyn, due to its proximity to several large nightclubs. While Bushwick may hold a reputation as a place for wealthy yuppies to party and take drugs, its nightlife tends to be more inclusive and welcoming, especially compared to elsewhere in the city.
One group that has found its home in Bushwick is the LGBT community. Bushwick's nightlife plays a central role in creating an environment where people of all orientations can thrive, and its function is anything but superficial. There are dozens of queer-centric places to hang out in Bushwick, from House of Yes to Elsewhere to Bossa Nova to Mood Ring. These places are visited by and accepting of all types of people, and form a place where various themes and cultures intersect with queer identities. For example, the Laylit Collective throws dance parties in Bushwick, mixing house and Middle Eastern music with a uniquely queer flair.
As Bushwick has grown more expensive, local venues and businesses have come under financial pressure. The neighborhood is certainly at an inflection point.
Compared to other more expensive parts of the city, Bushwick is relatively affordable, allowing for creatives and recent immigrants from Central and South America to continue calling it home.
Almost all the people that I've met in New York who are pursuing their dreams in the arts without financial support from their parents live right here in Bushwick.
However, it's likely Bushwick will soon share a similar fate to Williamsburg, whose former DIY venues and alternative spaces are now occupied by luxury housing, overpriced thrift stores, and expensive chains. Bushwick, and New York City more broadly, are home to intangible cultural assets. The art galleries, performance venues, businesses, restaurants, theaters, and above all, the many diverse and talented people that make the city so special.
However, public policy aimed at preserving Bushwick's cultural spaces could certainly be controversial.
In current times, it would probably be considered ludicrous to declare a random Bushwick nightclub a historical building. After all, many of these spaces haven't even been open for a decade, and providing government grants to a place where transplants go to party on ecstasy and ketamine may be politically untenable. In Europe, Berlin has provided funding in the past to help protect its club scene, which in 2024 was declared intangible cultural heritage by UNESCO. Berlin has also given out youth culture cards, which could be spent on cultural institutions like museums, theaters, and nightclubs. Despite nightlife arguably playing a much more central role in youth culture, many domestic arts programs primarily aid other cultural institutions like theater and performing arts. However, new government handouts or tax incentives for arts and nightlife venues could come at the expense of providing affordable housing or aid to the working class. Despite all of its changes, Bushwick remains relatively poor, with 27% of families living below the federal poverty line as of 2018, which is over twice the national average. Bushwick desperately needs increased social services for its low-income residents, many of whom are recent immigrants. In cities with limited resources, aid for creative and artistic spaces is often deemed to be low priority. Arts funding is subject to ethical debates about which sectors and groups of people are most deserving of government help. That said, there can be economic benefits to funding the arts, including nightclubs. Club culture generates billions in revenue for Berlin, providing jobs to locals and contributing significantly to the economy. It's certainly possible that without government support, we could see Bushwick's iconic clubs for dancing and alternative culture shutter and never return. There's a limited number of underutilized industrial spaces that could be used for the arts or dancing. Once they've all been sold and transformed into luxury condos, there's no going back. Bushwick's evolution from relative prosperity to urban decay to renewal and gentrification mirrors that of many revitalized neighborhoods in cities around the world. At times, the various interests in the neighborhood can seem to be in conflict, from preserving ethnic communities to supporting artists and building affordable housing. Whether you're a longtime Italian or Puerto Rican resident, an artist trying to get their start, a transplant from small-town Georgia, or a recent immigrant from Latin America, Bushwick remains an important community to many different types of people. Despite its issues and the fact that the neighborhood has now become a meme of sorts, Bushwick is one of the most dynamic and interesting places in all of New York. I hope it stays that way. If you have thoughts on city policies affecting Bushwick or other similar neighborhoods, let me know in the comments. Please like and subscribe, as it really does help the channel. And if you enjoyed this video, check out my videos on the evolution of Williamsburg or the history of Brooklyn brownstones. Thanks for watching. Peace.